Chapter 1. When it comes to sexual desires and actions, women often find themselves in difficult situations. Sex experts define women's desire by various characteristics, such as surroundings, mood, and likeness for the other party, and so on, which make it difficult for women to be finite about their passions. This creates a notion that women often don't know what they want, and that it is the job of men to decide for them. So when a lady says no, a man can wrongly determine that she didn't mean it, thus creating a danger of sexual assault. Consent and its conceit of absolute clarity places the burden of good sexual interaction on women's behavior. Woe betide she who does not know herself and speak that knowledge. Katherine Angel. Dr. Angel questions our ideas about women's desires, covering science and popular culture. The following chapters of this summary examine her views on sex and literature, the Me Too movement, consent issues, and male expectations, and explore why women should be expected to be aware of their own desires when others hardly pay attention to them or criticize them for even having these thoughts. It examines how society can take sexual assault seriously by teaching men and women the importance of consent and clear signs. Society must rethink its attitude towards sex, pleasure, and autonomy to develop a safe world for women. We live in an age where people are not scared to speak up or question popular beliefs. This is the critical time of increasing attention to technology and media, the best moment to educate men and women on their sexualities. Chapter 2. Expecting a woman's choice to be absolute opens the door to many misinterpretations for men. A woman may use her sexual desire to demonstrate that the violence she suffered was not intentional. Once a woman indicates her desire to have sex, her partner expects her to stick to her initial decisions and not change them. This is often the case where people say, "She wanted it." A woman's supposed yearning for a man renders her vulnerable. No one can defend or judge her. After saying yes, a woman isn't expected to say no to anything. All of these are misconceptions that women have suffered from in society. Not only do women suffer from sexual abuse, but they also endure injustice from within and outside their gender. For instance, during the Me Too movement, a social media movement aimed at getting women to speak up about their sexual abuse experiences, the experiences of wealthy white women were prioritized above those of young black women. A good example is those whose families had spent decades seeking justice from R. Kelly, an artist and sexual abuser. According to studies, white rape victims are more likely to be believed because black women are viewed as more mature and sexually knowledgeable. The result of this is that white rape convictions result in more severe punishments. Women are encouraged to be very vocal about their sexual desires and needs. However, this is still not protective enough for women. Women who are vocal about their sexual desires are expected to go along with everything, even if they have reservations. They are also socialized to feel responsible for the well-being of males and taught that if they signal interest, they must follow through. If they say no, they bear complete responsibility for repercussions. Remember, good communication is vital for preventing future wrongs, not simply correcting existing ones. Saying yes and freely expressing one's desires is difficult owing to sexist criticism. Many rape and assault cases center on whether the victim consented to sexual behavior, even though it has nothing to do with the case. A woman's desire to have casual sexual relations with a stranger might be used against her in court. For women, saying no is tricky because it can trigger violence in men and lead to disastrous consequences. On the other hand, saying yes can also be risky because, as mentioned earlier, women are either judged by their affirmation or are expected to follow through after saying yes. Chapter 3. Society often misunderstands women's actions because it refuses to listen to their needs. According to Dr. Angel, men enjoy the thought of sex more than women do, and they are also easier convinced about sex than women. Men are easily swayed by images and signs, unlike women who want assurance and sometimes commitment. When it comes to sexual desire between men and women, men are excused for being hostile because society views them as the more sexually active and willing participants. Men's sexual desire takes a long time to wear out, unlike women's. Women can easily switch off their sex mood and not be interested again for any reason. But men, on the other hand, struggle to control their sex drive. Many men have confessed to having to hide their erections in public or uncomfortable places. There are always some misconceptions when assessing a woman's level of desire, which is due to our inability to distinguish between the two types of desire, spontaneous and responsive. It is dangerous for men to determine a woman's level of desire based on assumptions. A woman's desire is only certain when she's clear about it. The experience of a sudden yearning for sex and the anticipation of sexual encounters is known as spontaneous desire. This kind of desire is less consistent in women since they may not be thinking about sex but are receptive to it. Their arousal is followed by desire, and they often have sex when they want to, rather than when they need to. It is important to consider the present sexual environment in which the cycle of arousal and desire occurs. The relationship, power dynamics, safety and trust, the motivations for sex, etc., are all vital. Men believe that a woman's innate need for sexual intimacy is at the core of the notion of responsive desire. This belief has the potential to compel women to pursue their sexual desires, even if they don't want to. They are expected to be receptive even if they aren't interested. Despite the reality that good sex isn't always easy, women are usually expected to put in the time and resources to be successful sexual partners. Chapter 4. Men should not be required to seek sexual initiation constantly. A man is indirectly set up for failure when he's always expected to be the one to initiate sex, and if he fails at this, he exposes himself to violence and disgrace from society. Unrealistic expectations induce high anxiety and shame, triggering male aggression. Society has conditioned men to deflect the blame and avoid accountability regarding sex. When a man falls short of his expected sexual intimacy, he deflects the blame by staying away from the woman. Men's non-sexual needs, motives, and incentives are largely overlooked because society believes that they enjoy sex more. Likewise, women ignore these incentives, making male desire for a biological necessity rather than a socially compelled action. To encourage a healthy sexual culture, we need to eliminate the misconception that sex is intrinsically satisfying to males, and the belief that women eventually trade sex for something valuable to them. Of course, sex may result in other desirable results, connection, closeness, bonding, but we must not dismiss sex as the cause of these outcomes. Instead, we need to make sex fun for both parties and strive for a society that honors and encourages women's sexual satisfaction while still embracing male desire. Men, like women, desire sex for non-sexual reasons, to prove their masculinity, the power of erection and ejaculation, and avoid the social implications of failure. Sexuality is experienced, learned, and grown through time and in specific settings, which is why sex is never just an act, but always enjoyable and significant in any relationship. If we want sex to be joyful and rewarding, we must liberate the sex environment by giving men and women the equal opportunity to be clear about their sexual desires. Chapter 5. It is a common belief that women enjoy sex more than men do, but they disguise it. Women may like sex, but they have been socialized to control their behavior, to withhold sex, to avoid being labeled promiscuous. Before deciding to have sex, women offer nonverbal objections, but once a woman goes home with a man, they will probably end up having intercourse. Keep in mind, it's not up to women to be free of abuse. It's up to others not to abuse them. There are a few obstacles that males must overcome to keep women from feeling terrible about their desire for sex. First, men must accept a woman's decision if she says no and means it. On the other hand, women sometimes claim that they didn't intend to say no, making it difficult to know what women really want. How can males tell what women want when women are ostensibly hiding their desires? The most typical response is the belief by men that they need to have a better grasp of what women's bodies do. One man tells the author that what ladies say they want and what they react to are two entirely different things. A woman's body may be screaming for sex, but she is adamant about avoiding having it. Men assume that a woman's body and words are different, but her body is the one being truthful. The argument above is flawed in many ways. Desire isn't directly proportional to arousal. Instead, biological designs heavily influence arousal, which is why a woman can get aroused or even reach an orgasm when she's being raped. Many sex experts believe that genital arousal is an innate reaction developed to protect a woman during sex from harm, trauma, and infection. The best way to avoid the confusion that comes with what a woman wants is to allow the woman to decide. If she says no, the man should back off and respect what she says, regardless of her body movements or signals. If she says yes, the sexual activity can continue unless she says otherwise. And in the situation where she looks uncomfortable saying yes, she should be left alone until she's sure if she wants to proceed or not. Chapter 6. Expecting women to know what they want when it comes to sex is an unrealistic expectation. Whether it's about their sexuality or anything else, it's extremely difficult to find anybody who's an expert on themselves. Women do not need to understand themselves to be protected from violence and shouldn't have to count on a man's reaction to their decisions before they can feel safe. Remember, expecting women always to have control over their sexual desires means denying them the right to say no. As explained earlier, a yes isn't enough to guarantee a woman's safety, neither is a no. Encouraging women to focus on male aggressiveness and its vulnerability risks scaring them into inaction and complacency, which is harmful. It might also be used as a pretext to exercise control over them. A persistent threat of violence, as well as the chance of its occurring, gives a rationale for males to defend women while getting access to them. Threats are thus a warning, a strategy for making a woman's every movement more or less accountable in managing the neutralized danger of violence. As a result of this, many women desperately want to hear that they have the right to explore their own sexuality without being pressured. All of this is critical in light of the disturbingly inadequate sex education available in so many countries, as well as the relatively close indifference about female pleasure in the sex education that does exist. There's also the belief that pleasure is often a low priority for women themselves, who consider their male partner's pleasure and satisfaction far more pressing than their own. Women need to prioritize their pleasure and make it known to their partners if any aspect needs to be worked on. Men also need to stop viewing sex as a right and become more open-minded when learning how to make their partners feel good. Sex is more than intimacy. It can also lead to a deeper connection between two or more people in the mind and soul. Did you know, according to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, about 43.6% of women in the United States have suffered some type of sexual violence in their lives. Conclusion. It's risky for women to keep their sexual desires and themselves hidden. It exposes them to other people's influence, which might lead to compulsion. Uncertainty regarding one's wants may intensify the coercive techniques that some men so confidently use. They understand what women want and how to convince them, whether with force or quietly. Many people claim that women should know what they desire to prevent male violence. But while it is assumed that women know what they want, it is almost impossible for us to be certain of our choices all the time. Contextualizing consent in this manner enables us to investigate its limits and the ethical consequences of agreeing to something usually rejected in traditional masculinity. But speech and truth-telling are not inherently emancipatory, and neither speech nor silence is inherently liberating or oppressive. Katherine Angel. Whether we recognize it or not, all human contacts are relational and responsive. We cannot dictate a particular way people should react to contact. Saying men must always ask for consent before any sexual move eliminates the pleasure of spontaneity. However, to create a level playing field, it's best if men ask if they can proceed with a sexual act or not. Women are well aware of their susceptibility to attack and the intricate agreements they must make to have pleasure. As a society, we are nowhere close to eliminating the disparity in power play between men and women during sex. However, we can do better through adequate sex education and awareness. Whatever we do, regarding sex or otherwise, we should attempt to comprehend other people's demands. Try this. As a woman, appreciate your sexuality and prioritize your pleasure. Be open with your partner and avoid placing someone else's needs over yours. Men should respect women's choices and be clear about their intentions too. It reduces the level of uncertainty and misunderstanding between both parties.